Welcome into another episode of Locked On Phillies. The first two games in Colorado are done, and while the Phillies are 1-1, they've both been kind of weird games. A great comeback, a controversial ejection. We'll break down what's happened so far out in Denver. Also, we'll preview today's series finale. Ranger Suarez on the bump. You know how I feel about their chances in this one. And a fun story out of the time in Colorado that kind of gives you the vibe of this team right now. So we'll get into a lot of stuff on today's episode.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is Locked On Phillies. I'm Connor Thomas, your host. Thank you so much for checking us out. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Please make sure you're rating, reviewing, and subscribing to the YouTube. All of that really helps me out here on Locked On Phillies. If you enjoy the content, that's the best way you can say thank you. So appreciate everyone who's already done that. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. The Phillies have had an interesting couple of days out in Colorado for their Memorial Day weekend. They lose game one on Friday. And I guess we'll start with that one because there's really one thing to be said. You're going to have games where you don't really come through in big spot. Like that happens to every team. You hope it doesn't, but it's just life, even for the best team in baseball right now. The Phillies had some good opportunities. I cannot believe that Jose Alvarado gave up the game-tying home run with 2 outs in the ninth inning. You're 1 out away from winning that game, and unfortunately, just fell short. But the good news for the Philadelphia Phillies, I guess, if there's good news out of that game, is they didn't have their best game, and they still, lost by one? I mean, it's just you don't beat this team easily. There is no easy win against the Philadelphia Phillies this year. They're too consistent. They're too focused. They fight. They have some clutch ability, and it's just more than some clutch ability. They have great clutch ability, some days more than others. But while it was a loss, it wasn't one of those losses where it's just like, oh, man, this team kind of just wasn't the better team that day. No, listen, they didn't have their best day and still were right in it and probably definitely should have won it. The big story out of game one, though, is the ejection by umpire number 120 of Bryce Harper. Not even going to give you a name. That's what Bryce Harper called him after the game, talking about it. And it was in the top of the first inning of the first game of a series on a holiday weekend with the best team in baseball's best player at the plate. For Bryce Harper to get ejected in that situation, he would have to do one of two things. He would have to either show up the umpire, which he did not do. Anyone who thinks that was showing up the umpire doesn't know baseball, doesn't understand what interactions between umpires and players are like. He was not showing up that umpire. The other thing that you can do to get ejected in that spot, being that player, is say one of the magic words. And it did not seem like Bryce Harper said anything, any special 4-letter word that would get him tossed from that game or called the umpire or anything. What it seemed like, so the whole situation, we had a frustrated helmet throw, which is going to be fine for you. You can't throw your helmet like that, whatever. I understand that. That's frustration. With the missed call, it was the second pitch of the at-bat, or the second strike of the at-bat. I forget if it was a 3-pitch strikeout, but you throw the helmet, okay, I got it. And then Bryce Harper standing there, taking his equipment off, putting it down at home plate, just like every other player does, so the bat boy can come get it. And he seems to be having a pretty controlled conversation with the home plate umpire. Hey, man, was that outside corner? Is that as far out as it goes? You got anything further out than that? Okay, I didn't think it was there. Yeah, I really thought it was low and away. I thought you missed that one. It's just my opinion. But, while it's not the type of conversation you should be having with an umpire if you want to get calls later on in the game, it's not a conversation that should lead to an ejection in that spot. It just shouldn't. That's a major, major miss by umpire number 120, who was behind the dish for game one of this one. And that's a big story of that game because Bryce Harper said it after. You don't know, but maybe the game's different. If he's in the game, especially with it ending up being a 1-run win, an extra innings game, Bryce Harper can impact the baseball game all the time, anytime he's at the plate. And taking that away from the Phillies is a major, major difference maker. And an umpire did that unwarrantedly in game one. So that's ridiculous. And of course, in game two, Bryce Harper's first at bat is an RBI single. So, I mean, that's just proof positive that there could have been a different ending on Friday night if that hadn't happened. But let's move on to game two, which was yesterday. Aaron Nola did not have his best stuff. And this was another one of those, the Phillies just feel out of it the whole time. They just felt like they did not have a chance in that game. They didn't have their best stuff. It was going to be a second game in a row where the offense didn't look great. And you're like, well, I'm kind of worried about them maybe having a slow, sleepy start to this road trip with this series in Colorado against a team that they should really be handling. I mean, you're just looking at it. They were down 3-1 in the fifth. They were down 3-1 going into, 3-2 in the fifth. They were down 3-2 going into the ninth. And in the top of the ninth, what did the Philadelphia Phillies do? From down 1 run, they score 6. It's unbelievable. They end up with 8 runs total in the game, 12 hits total in the game. That ninth inning was awesome. Edmundo Sosa has been really, really good. He was good in that. Alec Boehm, huge. Bryce Harper hits a home run in the night. Now, it's Colorado, and it didn't look like Bryce Harper thought he got enough. He looked surprised it went out. It was a really high trajectory swing, or hit, I should say, and down the left field line, which is not typically his power angle, and just happened to sneak out for a 3-run homer. So you love to see Bryce Harper doing that. The guy's swing looks good. He's going to have games where he strikes out because he's aggressive at the plate, just like he is on base pass, but that was big. And Garrett Stubbs, a big part of the game last night. He went out and had a 2-hit night, had an RBI, had a run, a stolen bag of third base, just creating a run that made it 3-2, all on his own to make the Phillies feel like they were a little more in the game before they made that ninth inning comeback. People talk about, like, this is something that I think we need to get into. People talk about Garrett Stubbs like he's terrible and doesn't deserve to be playing Major League Baseball. And I think part of it stems from his comments about the pool in Arizona last year. People were complaining, I shouldn't have been talking. He gave the Diamondbacks motivation. I'm not relitigating that. You can believe what you'd like to about that. I think that the Arizona Diamondbacks, with all the motivation in the world, should not have been good enough to beat the Philadelphia Phillies. So I see it as kind of a non-factor. I understand what happened in the series after Garrett Stubbs said those things. I do also agree with people that he shouldn't say anything like that, especially right after Orlando Arcia had what he had to say about Bryce Harper in the series with the Braves. So, like, I get where this comes from. People see Garrett Stubbs and they say, nah, he's on the team for just like a locker room guy. I think he's solid defensively. I really do. And I also think that he's better than people give him credit for, just as a baseball player in general. Is he an everyday player on this team or probably any major league team? No, he's not. Is he a guy that's important to this team? Less than a lot of guys, but he's not unimportant and he's not unneeded. And I've had people asking me one way or the other, are they going to make a change at backup catcher? Are they going to get someone at the deadline? I think it'd be silly to get a backup catcher at the deadline, considering JT Realmuto is a guy who's going to be out there every postseason game. You're basically spending for something that you may not use, and that's silly, in my opinion, especially with the durability of Realmuto. I know he's been a little bit banged up at points this year. He's getting older. Worst case, you've done so well, you're going to have such amount of wins piled up by late in the season. You can give him days off, and you can survive Garrett Stubbs. I mean, listen, we had this conversation. It's the exact same conversation as Johan Rojas to start the season. You might say, no, Rojas is a much better defender. They say, he's had moments where he's hit. Here's why it's the exact same conversation. Because this team is good enough to carry lesser players to victory. If Alec Boehm's in the lineup, if Bryson Stott's in the lineup, if Kyle Schwarber's in the lineup, if Bryce Harper's in the lineup, if all these guys that are in the top of the lineup and superstar players and everything having amazing years, if they're in the lineup, they're going to be good enough to make up for Garrett Stubbs' inefficiencies, right? Yeah, I don't think that one player can sink this team. I think the only way that this team doesn't cash in on what they've started with, by that I mean finish out the regular season strong. We're coming up on the 1/3 of the way through the season, the 33% mark. it would have to be multiple injuries for long periods of time. Like, that's the only way you really slow this team down significantly. And Garrett Stubbs playing like once a week for JT Realmuto, it's not enough of an issue for you to make a major change. I understand we're focusing on it because there's so few issues. So when you find one, you're kind of like, wow, I haven't complained about something in a while. Stubbs stinks. Like, I understand the nature of a fan to do that because you want to continue to see this team improve. And some people are uncomfortable without having something to look at to say, okay, they can still do better at this. But I'm telling you, folks, like, I'm not saying, Garrett Stubbs is a starter in Major League Baseball. Everyone be nice to him. He's way better than you think. I'm not saying that. I know his inefficiencies. I know his inabilities, but he is good enough for his role on this team that the team can still win with him doing that role. And that should be all that matters. So good stuff from Stubbs yesterday. I don't expect that to be a trend, but it's nice for him to do that, especially considering the criticism. Nice for the Phillies to split the first two. Coming up, we're going to talk about Game 3 of this series. The Phillies haven't lost a series since April 1st to April 3rd against the Cincinnati Reds. We are now at Memorial Day weekend, and they've only lost 2 series this year. They could, though, if they don't go out and win today. Good news. Check who's on the mound. You can take a look at that, and we'll discuss it coming up as we continue today's episode of Locked On Phillies. First, let me tell you about Ibotta. Spring is sprung, and that means spring cleaning. Now, it feels like summer outside, but you know the deal. You got to clean everything up. Maybe you're cleaning out your closet, or you're doing some sweeping and stuff like that, rearranging your house or apartment, all of that stuff. Well, that means stocking up on cleaning supplies, swapping out your winter clothes for new spring clothes. Make sure you're using Ibotta to get real cash back with every purchase. It's a free app, Ibotta is, that gives you the most cash back every time you shop on hundreds of items, from groceries to beauty supplies to toys. So you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. Listen to this. The average Ibotta user, same thing, earns $256 per year. That could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip, that flight you've been eyeing, a fancy dinner. If you're dropping $256 at dinner, you have more expensive taste than me. That could get me 4 dinners, $256. That's nice. Ibotta will do that for you. Listen, other apps give you points to you don't amount to much. Ibotta, just add your offers in the app, upload your receipt, and you get real cash. Join over 50 million users already using Ibotta, and right now, they're going to offer our listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta by using code LOCKEDONMLB when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app to start earning cash back, and use code LOCKEDONMLB. That's Ibotta, IBOTTA, in the Google Play or App Store, and just use code LOCKEDONMLB. I also want to tell you about our new friends over at Supply House. You might not have heard of them before, even if you've been listening to this show. Well, guess what? Supply House is great because you can get supplies from the site that's made for the skilled trades, supplyhouse.com. Supplyhouse.com is the reliable way to order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Maybe you're doing stuff around the home yourself. Maybe you own a business and you want to find the best way to get the products you need to continue your work in these fields. Well, go ahead and check it out. I mean, you could shop a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from over 400 top brands, and you can get your order delivered right to your door with fast shipping from coast to coast. Need help with an order? They've also got expert support and industry-leading service from the friendliest folks in the business, and you get to talk to a real person every time. There's no recordings or machines. Pros in the skilled trades can get a competitive edge by joining SupplyHouse.com's free Trade Master program. Every Trade Master gets access to a dedicated phone line, free shipping, discounts on every order. It's the best way to do this. So join the thousands of trade pros already benefiting from their free membership at supplyhouse.com/TM and order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from anywhere with just a few clicks at supplyhouse.com. All right. Now, I fight with this every single darn time, right? I woke up this morning. I'm recording this on Sunday. Sorry, they got away from me yesterday, but I promised you an extra episode this weekend, and I'm delivering on that promise today. But when I woke up this morning, It's a beautiful day. The sun's shining, the birds are chirping, 75 degrees, Memorial Day weekend. I got nothing to do today besides talk to you folks here on Locked On Phillies, which I love doing. But my first thought was not, let's go down the shore. My first thought was not, let's go to the pool. Let's go for a walk outside and enjoy the weather. Oh, let's go get a beer. No, my first thought was, Ranger Suarez is on the mound today at 3:10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and I cannot wait to watch him take the mound. Like, I battle with this every time, in that every time Ranger Suarez steps on the mound, I feel like the Phillies are going to win. I just do. And everybody should at this point. They're 10-0 in his starts. He's 9-0 on the season. Now, rationally, logically, I know he's not going to win every single start, and I know the Phillies are not going to win every single start he makes this year. But when you see him matched up against the 17-34 Rockies with the 38-15 Phillies lineup behind him and what he's done, now the Rockies have had trouble against lefties, and you look at a 9-0 record, a 1.36 ERA, a .79 WHIP, and 66 innings pitched with 68 strikeouts. I just, it's amazing, the feeling. Like, I have not, since 2011, had the feeling when Ranger Suarez steps on the mound that I do now. The last guy I felt this with was Roy Halladay. I got to be honest, I haven't felt it with Zach Wheeler. Zach Wheeler's ceiling is higher than Ranger Suarez on any given day, I think. I think Zach Wheeler's just got more natural ability, right? Throws harder. I think his movement is a little bit better. Like, his stuff is better than Ranger Suarez. He's kind of a bigger body pitcher. He looks more like a pitcher, right? Not any knock on Ranger Suarez. He's amazing. But I don't get the sense when Wheeler goes out there that he's untouchable. I get the sense that he's very, very good, and on any given day, he could be untouchable. Ranger Suarez right now, there's kind of this implied feeling that it's just like, okay, he's not going to give up any hard hits. He's not going to get hurt. If he runs into any kind of trouble, he'll be out of it in a second. That is just the vibe right now around Ranger Suarez. And he's going to be facing off against Cal Quantrill, who has not been great this year for the Colorado Rockies. He's 3-3, 3.59 ERA. He's been good, just not great. A 1.25 WHIP, 44 Ks and 57 2/3 innings pitched. So the strikeout just hasn't been there for Quantrill. And also, he's a righty. We know. I tell you all the time, every time I talk about pitching matchups, righty pitchers have a harder time against the Philadelphia Phillies than lefties do. Makes sense with Schwarber and Harper and Stott and Marsh and guys like that are better against right-handed pitchers. So let's just look at the numbers real quick. The Phillies are minus 215 on the money line. They have a 69.3% chance to win according to ESPN Analytics. And I think a couple of things happen. First, I said it after game one. I want the Phillies to beat the brakes off this team for the next two games because of I was mad at the umpires and the way that game ended in the 11th inning. And now they had opportunities and they should be annoyed with the way they lost that game, even though it happens. And then last night you kind of look at it and you say, okay, well, he didn't really beat the brakes off anybody until the ninth inning. It felt like the Rockies were treading water. Like, oh, man, how long can we keep this Phillies team down before we beat them game one? We've got them on the ropes in game two. And then you give up 6 in the top of the ninth, and it's just kind of like, oh, shucks, here we go again. And it feels like, momentum-wise, for a team like the Phillies, they would wipe that in a day. For a team like the Rockies, that carries over to the next day. You see their ace, or not their ace, but their best pitcher. Zach Wheeler's still the ace on the team. But you see their best pitcher right now in Ranger Suarez. It just kind of feels like a game where the Phillies should roll. I have a really good feeling about today's game. I have a really good feeling about Ranger Suarez on the mound. That's easy to say. I'm not breaking any news, but I would expect the Philadelphia Phillies to win today. I would expect it to be another series win. And I would expect us, when I do an episode tomorrow, to be talking about that San Francisco Giants series that's coming up next as a very, very winnable series for their, 100 billionth series win in a row. But let's not worry about that one yet. We will get into that tomorrow after hopefully the Phillies take care of the Colorado Rockies today. Those are my thoughts on game 3. Holiday weekend. I'm losing track of the days. And hopefully it goes that way. But coming up, we're going to talk about something a little bit off the cuff, or I guess off the beaten path. That's actually too on the nose once you hear what this story is about. But an outfield adventure occurred over the first couple of days in Colorado, and we'll talk about it as we wrap up today's episode. But let's talk about FanDuel first, because it's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, New customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. What I would do, you don't have to do this, but what I would do is I would go bet Phillies money line today. Just put $5 on it. The Phillies are going to beat the Rockies today. You're going to get $150 in bonus bets because that $5 bet should win. And then you have that to spend on a whole bunch of other stuff with the NBA playoffs, NHL playoffs going on. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. It's FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, and you can go ahead and make some money for the Memorial Day weekend. So this was really cool, and I got to give credit to Alex Coffey of the Philadelphia Inquirer for writing the story that I read this morning about a bit of an adventure that Brandon Marsh went on. So if you've never been to Coors Field, I'm sure you've at least seen it on TV. And out by the visitors' bullpen, there's this kind of small mini forest type thing. They have trees. There's like a little river back there. It's very cool. It's very Colorado. It's very unique. This is why baseball's so awesome, because ballparks have these cool quirks about them that don't exist in basketball or hockey or football even. Like, sure, football you have slightly different than cookie cutter, but every basketball arena is basically the same. Every hockey arena is basically the same. There's nothing like cool or unique about it. It's just a round building with a quarter place for the ice inside. And football is not too much different. But baseball has unique features. And the Phillies outfielders went and discovered one of these unique features through the first couple games of the series. So Brandon Marsh goes out. And during BP, he's wandering around the forest. He said he wants to connect with nature a little bit more, which just sounds very on brand for Brandon Marsh. You see why Off the Beaten Path was an apt way to describe what I'm talking about here. And so he went and found a waterfall out there, and then apparently he found a nice rock that he liked. He was trying to collect rocks. I don't know, man. Listen, do whatever you're doing right now that helps the Phillies keep winning. But unfortunately, he did that before game one, so he had to throw the rock away because they lost. So he's got to go get another rock. No word on whether or not he did that yesterday and if it worked to help them win the game. I know they did win, but we'll have to give you a rock update when we get one. But then, because Brandon Marsh talked to his teammates about it, Nick Castellanos and Johan Rojas went out there yesterday before game two, and they kind of walked around and explored it and checked it out and hung by a waterfall. And I wonder, so Johan Rojas, obviously English not his first language. He can speak it solidly enough for someone learning a second language, but Spanish is his first language. And then Nick Castellanos is just, remember, he called Scooby-Doo his favorite superhero. This guy is he is not your typical average person when it comes to conversation. I hesitate to call him weird because I don't want him to I don't want him to fight me. Can be a scary guy sometimes, but you know what I mean. He's kind of out there sometimes, Nick Castellanos. He's a very unique type of personality. I imagine standing in the small forest behind the bullpen at Coors Field, I should say. And it's Nick Castellanos and Johan Rojas just looking at a waterfall for a couple minutes. I would love to know what that conversation was like. But it also, I know this is kind of a funny, what does this have to do with anything? Conversation is just a cool side story that happens throughout baseball because baseball is weird. But here's why this is actually kind of really cool. Because Brandon Marsh goes and he says, I want to see things different to break up the monotony of a baseball season. You don't see that from teams that are getting smoked all the time. This is something that these stories only seem to come out of good teams who are having fun, partially because you get the luxury of not always focusing on how you can play better, but also it's important to keep things loose and light. Stay loose and sexy is what Brandon Marsh called the potential Phillies rock band if they put one together. Well, this is what helps you stay loose, and then you tell your teammates about it, and then they want to experience it, and it becomes a bonding thing for three guys that spend a lot of time in the outfield together. And that's the kind of stuff where it's just this team really does enjoy their company, each other's company. They like being around each other. They like doing weird stuff. They have a bunch of different personalities. Brandon Marsh's trip to the forest was probably a lot different than Rojas's, which was a lot different than Castellanos, but they can all experience it together. And that just every day. Then when you have games where you lose, you go, yeah, it sucked. And we need to go back to work. but I know the guys around me and I trust the guys around me and I know how they operate. And we've built that relationship together to know that we're all moving in the right direction and we're all on the same page. And that might sound stupid to compare that to just wandering through a small forest inside a baseball stadium, but that's why this team, part of the reason why this team is just so in the zone right now, because they do everything right, from before the game to during the game to after the game to days where they don't even have a game. And I love it. I cannot like this team anymore unless they keep winning. And then I will start liking them more every single time. It's been such a fun time. I need them to win today, obviously, because I already said they're going to beat the Colorado Rockies in Game 3, and I need them to win this series. But yeah, it's been good for the Philadelphia Phillies. Tomorrow, next episode, we're going to talk about the end of the Rocky series. We're going to preview their series with the Giants, and we're also going to take a look at the standings because it'll be Memorial Day, and that's a time where a lot of people start to check in on the standings in earnest and actually put stock in them. And I'm just going to give you a little bit of a preview. You're going to love where the Phils are at. All that on the next episode, but that's all for today's episode. Thank you so much for checking us out. Once again, we're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Please make sure you're rating, reviewing, subscribing to the YouTube, all that great stuff. And I will talk to you next time on the next episode of Locked On Phillies. By the way, enjoy the rest of your holiday weekend.